Good afternoon, Patriot pals. Thank you for joining me. Have a good day and God bless you. Let's get into the news. Where the Twitter executives were brought in front of Congress yesterday to go ahead and answer for their actions against silencing Americans on behalf of the U.S. government working alongside the Biden administration and Democrat congressmen within the U.S. House of Representatives in order to silence voices, whether they be doctors or average citizens, with their assertions against their propaganda and their narratives that were being pushed back in 2020, 2021, 2022. Prior to Elon Musk buying the platform, Elon Musk definitely is having the last laugh after these failed executives who were fired by Elon Musk had to stand before Congress yesterday and answer for their actions of why they were going around silencing people on the platform again at the behest of the U.S. government, intel agencies and the Biden administration. So let's go ahead dive into what we have here. It says to Woke Stocks he felt the heat today. Elon must shed no tears as fire Twitter executives face congressional drumming. Yeah, I had a video here from yesterday. You go check it out where you can see some of the grilling that the former executives at Twitter had to face yesterday. The House Oversight Committee on Wednesday held a full committee hearing on government and big tech collusion and suppression of speech in regard to the Hunter Biden laptop report. Republican members were prepared, broaden the evidence and execute brilliantly after hearing. Democrats sounded like self-absorbed liars who supported the denial of God-given human rights. Twitter's top former censors were on the hot seat all day as they appeared before a Republican-led House Oversight Committee to answer questions about their outrageous and targeted censorship of conservatives, including former President Donald J. Trump. Republican lawmakers Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Nancy Mace, Pauline Luna, Jim Jordan scored knockout blow after knockout blow as they expose the former Twitter executives for colluding with the FBI in private public groups and restricting free speech and silencing Americans in a clear violation of the U.S. Constitution. Elon then went to Twitter to go ahead and gloat over the grilling that the former executives had. He said that Woke Stocks he felt the heat today when a fire that Elon added this on top of that someone had responded said I recently went to a Stasi museum in Berlin and found it interesting that they call themselves anti-fascist at the beginning. And Elon responded with exactly yes, we know how this goes on says go on go Elon, thank you for doing your part, say free speech in the West. Now thank you Elon for purchasing Twitter and getting rid of these losers here who thought they were above the U.S. Constitution, thought they were above elected representatives and decided to go ahead and work alongside the intel agencies in order to silence many Americans. If this was happening at Twitter, we know for sure the evidence is clear that it's taking place at places like Instagram, also on YouTube and other big tech platforms. This is not isolated only to Twitter. And some significant news. Elise Stefanik on the first Weaponization Committee hearing, House GOP Conference Chair, Elise Stefanik of the first Select Committee hearing to approve political weaponization within the federal government against political opponents will occur Thursday and lay the groundwork for future hearings. Stefanik, who was appointed to the Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government, along with other notable members, said the event will set the stage for House Republicans to unearth, expose and terminate political bias within the federal government, often directed towards conservatives or American First Americans. Quote, this first hearing will be critical to laying the groundwork to uproot the long-standing political weaponization against the American people entrenched in the federal government, she said. Stefanik pledged the subcommittee chaired by House Judiciary Committee Chair Representative Jim Jordan will particularly fight against partisanship within the FBI, CIA and NIH along with corruption and abuse across all facets of the entrenched federal bureaucracy. Quote, the FBI is partisan censorship, violating First Amendment rights and civil liberties, and full weaponization against the American people will be exposed as the Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization for the Federal Government hits the ground running this week. She said. She continues, quote, accountability is coming. And we will get to the bottom of this and deliver the truth and accountability on behalf of the American patriots who have been unfairly targeted by corrupt government agencies. She said, citing her experience of defending former President Donald Trump from impeachment. She states, quote, just as I laid out the facts during the sham impeachment against President Donald Trump successfully defeated Democrats' partisan process and exposed the DOJ as targeting of parents. Through my oversight questioning. I will lead the charge to root out corruption in our government agencies, she's added. In January, Stefanik listed the deep state abuses the committee will investigate over the next 2 years. Quote, take the FBI and DOJ for starters, she concluded. Virginia Education Board member denied confirmation after criticizing socialism in Virginia. Woman who advocated for traditional American values was kicked from the Virginia Board of Education after contending that socialism is, quote, incompatible with freedom. Suparna Datta, who Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin appointed to the Virginia Board of Education in July, was removed from her nomination just moments before she was said to be confirmed by the state of Virginia. Virginia State Senator Ghazala Hashmi introduced an amendment that strips Datta of her nomination. The amendment, Youngkin explained that Senate Democrats voted to remove Datta, shockingly claiming that a public school parent is not qualified to serve on the Board of Education, before also adding that she is not only qualified, she epitomizes parental involvement in our schools, and we need her voice on our Board of Education. The amendment to strip Datta of her nomination comes after a tense discussion at last week's board meeting where she stated that socialism and communism are, quote, incompatible with democracy and individual freedoms, and that the, quote, Declaration of Independence and the Constitution are remarkable documents. Datta, who stated that, quote, I think socialism is just as bad as communism, was branded as a, quote, far-right extremist by the Virginia Grassroots Coalition, a leftist advocacy group that started a campaign to block her confirmation. Biden administration says it will terminate Trump-era immigration restrictions. The Biden administration told the Supreme Court this week that it will end the Trump-era Title 42 policy, which allows border agents to expel migrants at the border as the country faces a growing illegal immigration crisis. U.S. Solicitor General Elizabeth Probloger submitted a filing to the High Court which is weighing a case on the policy, saying the White House will allow Title 42 to expire in May when the administration's pandemic public health emergency ends. Quote, Title 42 is a public health measure, not an immigration enforcement measure, and should not be extended indefinitely. John Pierre stated Republicans criticized the White House's move as thousands of illegal immigrants cross the border each day. Quote, getting rid of Title 42 will recklessly and needlessly endanger more Americans and migrants by exasperating the catastrophe that is occurring at our southern border, said Arizona Attorney General Mark Brnovich. Quote, unlawful crossings are estimated to surge from 7,000 per day to as many as 18,000. Representative Mike Garcia accused the Biden administration of lying to the American people, saying the end of the public health emergency does not require an end to Title 42. Quote, Title 42 should remain in place as it's the only backstop to an open border. We must keep this policy in place and work to strengthen our border security. Garcia wrote on Twitter. Biden says that polls don't matter and the media is too negative. During an interview on Wednesday, Joe Biden reacted to poor polling numbers. The interviewer asked, quote, the picture you painted last night, unemployment at a record low, the growth in the economy. Inflation is coming down, incomes are rising. And yet when you mentioned the polls, when you look at the polls, a CBS poll, 64% of Americans think the economy is in bad shape. There's an NBC poll, 71% think that country's on the wrong track. Why the disconnect? Biden responded, quote, because the polls don't matter anymore. You've got to make 40 or 50 calls on a cell phone to get someone to answer a poll. Even the pollsters, you've talked to them, ask them what they think about this sort of thing. The interviewer then cut in to ask, quote, so you don't think it's your policy? Biden responded, quote, by the way, if you ask the same thing, do they support rebuilding infrastructure in America? Overwhelmingly they support it. Ask anybody. Do they support the CHIPS and Science Act? We've attracted $300 billion in investments, we invented those chips. They're coming back to America, they're going to be leaders again. When you ask them about whether or not they think they're paying too much for drug prices, overwhelmingly, yes. Look, people went through hell, the last several years, the last 5 years. In the pandemic, we lost 1 million people dead. And so every time you turn on the news, or any of you reporting any positive news, I don't mean you personally, editorially. And so you turn on the television and everything's down, and so people, understandably, are down. Close quotes. Rogersville vows to expel all Chinese goods from defense supply chains. The chairman of the House Armed Services Committee is vowing to expel all Chinese goods and materials from the United States defense supply chains. Chairman Mike Rogers said that he would lead the effort to expunge China's sourced goods during a February 8 hearing of the committee on the subject of defense industrial base security. Quote, "The greatest concern I have with the defense industrial base is our continued reliance on China as the source of raw materials." Rogers said, quote, "I will not stop until we've completely rid the defense supply chain of Chinese goods and materials." Rogers said that Communist China will inadvertently control too many parts of the supply chain, and is required to equip the military and conduct security operations. He singled out the United States' continued reliance on China for rare earth materials and non-advanced semiconductor chips, and said that the regime's grip on such supplies would need to be broken. Quote, "The Chinese Communist Party maintains a tight grip on many of our material supply chains, including critical minerals and semiconductors," Rogers said. It concludes, quote, "We will never prevail in a conflict with China if they're the source of our military supply. Thank you very much. WWG1WGA. Give me your thoughts below and hit subscribe.